Good afternoon, everybody. Um, I'm an associate member of T3 Trading Group, which is an SEC registered broker dealer and member of FinRecipic. All of my trades are placed through T3 Trading Group. You should carefully consider whether a trade is suitable for you in light of your own financial condition. Yo, buddy, what's up, Rock? Position disclosure here. I actually added on a bunch of new positions, none of them with massive size. They're all on the smaller side. NNE, Serve, Microsoft, Reddit, Jumai. Kind of worked out okay for me. Um, let's dive in. There's no reason why today can't be a pretty quick afternoon meeting, but if you guys have questions, I'm happy to stick around. I got nowhere to be. It was a really, really, really tight, really, really boring session at the index level. And the spies here closed exactly flat, which by the way is bullish. The Qs here closed exactly flat, which by the way is bullish. The IWM closed up 0.4%, which by the way is bullish. The TLT finished down a quarter of a percent. Notable. I don't want to read into this, but we did have 3 down days in a row. If that acceleration continues, it could shake things up a little bit and potentially be bearish. And the dollar was up a little bit because UP ETF is still below 2750, so I'm not really concerned about that right now. Bitcoin finished down a little bit, but well off of its lows. Oil was up, and gold's just been in this range still, or I'm not even going to bother looking at it. Index level, look, nothing to talk about. Look how quiet and sloppy today's trading session was. Like Pat said, felt a little illiquid at times. Going over the daily chart, this is one of the tightest range daily candles probably of the entire year. I wouldn't be surprised if you told me it is the tightest day of the entire year. I'm not gonna waste my time trying to figure that out exactly, but it's one of the tightest range days of the entire year. And nothing has changed, which is why we could potentially do a quicker meeting today. Nothing has changed. Time is bullish. I would note that. The more time you spend above these previous resistance levels, the more the moving averages catch up, the less extended you get on multiple time frames. So time is bullish and closing unchanged is bullish because it lets the vol control funds continue to add some exposure. We're at the point with the systematics where they could add more exposure, but they could also sell off. So it's a little bit more neutral from the perspective of those systematic funds. But on an unchanged close, it just lowers that look back average on the realized vol that lets more buying come in. And we're continuing to hold above levels. So it's the same thing I'll say right now that I said in the morning meeting. Just know your levels. On the downside, we're going to start at SPY 640, which the ADMA is confirmed now. Then SPY 636 is the starting point of the CPI. And then below that, we'll worry about that when we get to that point. So that is on the SPY level. Um, the on the upside, pretty much all-time highs is there. I'm seeing something out of the corner of my eye that's saying the SPX 1DTE straddle is tied for the cheapest it's been all year. So we're pricing in another snooze fest for tomorrow. And it makes sense because we are, in the heart of the slowest part of the year in August here. But you do still have that strong buyback component to things, right? Pat's note, I still have it up actually. Right here, it mentioned that we can expect $5 to $6 billion of demand from corporate buybacks per day in this open window here at the end of August, and that's typically the biggest time of the year for buybacks. So just a huge underlying bid to this market. Know your levels. Nothing else really to say about that. The Qs are into their ADMA on the daily, so they've been a little bit weaker the last few trading sessions. Also really tight, but they also haven't broken any major support levels. And the IWM has kind of taken the baton of relative strength. They've been, for once, the benefactor of rotation. As we've seen a little bit of weakness come from the Palantirs and AMDs and maybe arguably the NVIDIAs as the IWM has strengthened and the UNHs have strengthened and some value plays have strengthened a little bit. So if anything, the IWM is probably the most exciting looking chart right now. 225 is the important downside level. The ADMA has caught it. and then the highs in the last couple trading sessions, and then the high from this recent move, 231.50, are important on the upside. So just know your levels and act accordingly. We can never break any support levels. It'll be notable, and we can figure out if we should be pressing downside. Otherwise, probably just expect these flags to continue. But maybe Jerome Powell shakes us up a little bit on Friday. Who knows? So yeah, and that's it at the index level. Literally nothing to talk about. Despite that, individual stocks I find right now are trading much better than the equities on a lot of days. Like those names, because of dispersion, you're still seeing some bigger movements coming in from individual stocks. That seems to be where the opportunity is. So, like, Microsoft was a focus for me today. The short through 520. I cheated on it. I kind of front ran it a little bit. And, Microsoft had an okay little down day today, considering that the SPYs did nothing. They actually rallied heavy into the close, this Microsoft. And even with that, it closed down 0.6%. But this thing traded down almost $10, not $9 intraday, from the high to the low. So there was an okay trade there. There was an okay trade in Reddit for the RDR that we called out in the morning meeting today. That was also a focus for me. A couple in-play names. NNE was one of my better names of the day. I shorted this pre-market above 34, called it out in the VTF. So if anybody joined me, it was a good one. I was looking at Serve, and I was in Serve too, but that did nothing. I kept it, but I'm down very small in a small position in this serve. It's only one intraday that I did not make money on. And then I started a real small short later in the day in Jumai above 8, which I kept as well. Flat small green on that overnight. So it actually was not a terrible day for me on an intraday basis, trading with some of these stocks that are moving a little bit underneath the surface of things. But broadly speaking, we are just waiting for this market to do something. Uh, can we actually ever get a pullback? The biggest thing for me right away this morning, the price action in the market had me a little bit excited pre-market. I was a little bit excited pre-market because we actually gapped down, and that almost never happens anymore. And I was a little bit excited at 9:50 when the Qs were breaking lower and kind of going after Friday's low. But even as I was looking at it pre-market and as I was looking at the Qs when I thought they could break down a little bit, there was just never any real confirmation from this VIX. I know we had a little bit of a spike at 10, but then we just dribbled lower all day. And even worse than the VIX was this silly VVIX. VVIX was gross. Gapped down this morning with the market gapping down and just traded down, and almost looked like there was just a big seller that just rammed this thing here, where I'm not going to rehash it, but there was a bunch of chatter. Me and Pat were both talking about how, like, this was a stock that looks like a capitulation buy and something that's getting destroyed. But it's not a stock. It's a crappy ETN that's based on forward month or 2 month VIX futures or whatever it is that decays in multiple fashions at the same time. So just a real piece of garbage product. But even with that, I still bought that a little bit. Like I think I said in the VTF when it happened, I was like, if this was a stock, I'd buy it huge. It's not a stock. I bought it anyway for a little bit of a trade, and I liquidated everything, all the extra stock there that I bought into this up move. I sold a little bit on the way up, but really I ended up selling the remainder of that stock at $13.01 into the close. So I made like 5 cents on it. So big money, big money. That's pretty much it. I got the CTA Goldman update here in the VTF. Thank you for posting that. Over the next 1 week, in a flat tape, we're expecting 4.65 billion into the U.S. So let's just call it $1 billion a day in a flat tape. So today was as flat can get. An up tape, you actually get a little bit less, 3.25. And in a down tape, you are flat. Basically, there's neither buyers or sellers. That's disappointing. I would like to see a sell number there into a down tape to make that risk to the downside. When you look at the 1 month numbers, that's where you can really see the risk to the downside. 67 billion of selling it out of the U.S. in a down tape over the course of the next 1 month. 12 billion of buying the flat tape. So I would say that the risk is coming more and more to the downside from the systematics, but you still have to trigger the levels. The first CTA short-term trigger is 62.70 now. Let's see. where that has us on the chart. I presume continues to work its way up. What did I just say? 62.70. What's this low? So just below now the August 4th's low. So like a dollar below it is that first trigger. So, if we could retest August lows, we would be triggering easily the first CTA sell trigger, short-term sell trigger, pivot point, whatever you want to call it. So it's interesting to see that creep up. But the market keeps creeping up also. So it's like you don't really get too much closer because the market keeps grinding. But I do think it's in play at a certain point. So that's all I got. Happy to answer any questions from Tate. Besides limit stops and occasional market order, are there any other order types you'd recommend for execution? I asked Pat for his layout to compare it with mine, but it turned out we're using the same setup. Yeah, so you kind of covered it there. Buy stop, sell stop, buy limit, bid, sell limit, offer. Market buy, market sell. I don't really use those too much. And then the only other thing I have in there is what I call an uptick and a downtick key, which it's what I primarily use if I'm taking liquidity. I rarely take liquidity via market orders unless it's a stop that's triggering. Otherwise, I use an uptick and a downtick, which basically is just an order that takes liquidity, but only through a certain amount, through like 3 cents or through 5 cents or something like that. So if I go to buy, 2,000 shares or something, and I press my uptick key, and I think it's set through 5 cents, and there's only 1,000 shares liquidity between the inside offer and 5 cents up, then I'll only get filled 1,000 shares of the 2,000, and then the rest of the order cancels. So I'm not just getting any price that possibly exists similar to a market order. So that's the only other thing I have in there that I use that you did not mention. Um, William's saying I have F11 and F12 as a custom order that I think is market and gives 2 cent price improvement. Okay. I've never heard of a key that automatically gives price improvement, but maybe you can share some information on how you built it for some of the people here who might be interested. What else, guys? Anything else? Okay. Okay. So it's a limit order. So it's not a market order then. That's not a market order. It's a limit order. It's kind of what mine is, except it disappears. It doesn't get to fill. Yours, I guess, rests. Um, if you have a through 2 cents, so it's a take liquidity key as a limit order, but then it rests as a limit order. Um, yeah, but it's not a market order because if it like I said, if you went to buy 10,000 shares of a thin stock, you're not going to get that. You're going to get 500 shares, and then 9,500 shares is going to go inside bid 2 cents in. Marketable limit order. I don't know what that is. Leave that to the experts. Brant was right on about my tech expertise earlier in the day when he was chatting. Check out the YouTube from Daddy Trades. Was short Microsoft after the earnings report. Covered around 522.50. Got long today at 516. Gap fill for a swing back up to 526, 532. Hasn't had a bid, but I feel like the price action in the close. Yeah, so I'm short Microsoft. I'm shorted above 520 today. I'm keeping it as a swing. I just, there we discussed in the morning meeting today that there's a case to be made for sure for a Microsoft long. Um, at least there was pre-market because the earnings report was phenomenal. It was holding gap fill support. The 21 EMA was catching up. But what I was saying on the short side was you have a big support level. You have a market that hasn't been as supportive. We know positioning in this thing is also very long. We had seen that it was a 9.5 out of 10. But more importantly, from a technical perspective, this thing hasn't been able to uptick in over a week. You could just see here One, two, three, four, five, six. On six of the most recent trading sessions, four of them, they trot around the stock intraday and pound it back down. That's why those upside tails exist. And then you have one green day, but the very next day, that green day was negated and sold all the way back down. Somebody's been dumping the stock above 520 and not letting it move up, despite the support that's been there, despite the fact that the market has continued higher. So for me, looking at that weakness and, um, the market hasn't broken down, but I don't like the market here. So I'd like to think that the market could be on my side. You could definitely argue that it's not. But I like this from through 520 today. Worked out really well for me. I covered some on the way down, obviously. My target on my short is 500. It probably only gets there if I get some market assistance. But I love the relative weakness. I love that it lost support after those upside tails. And I think if you could get any sort of a pullback on the market at all, that starts soon, that Microsoft will see 500. So that's my target on that one. Uh, Also took a Tesla long today in front of the 200 day. See if this thing can't get back. Yeah, it's got to get back about 338 Tesla for the Bulls. And it had a good day today. I was concerned on Friday that it shouldn't have lost Thursday's low. It kind of pulled, I thought, a little bit too deep down. But it's really not a wedge breakout failure, in my opinion, unless it gets back down to 320. So as long as it's holding above 320, I think it's okay to try to be long the name. You could be long versus Friday's low, and then today it showed good relative strength. You want to see today's relative strength give some follow through, get it back above 338, really get back above probably 340 at this point, negate Friday's candle, and then Tesla will start looking really good again for bulls. So we'll see. From Kevin, consolidations are spawns of the devil. They're like money churners. Um, I like, my cash flow strategy that I spent a lot of time getting into in afternoon meetings in the past. So I won't do it today. You can go back and look at it if you've never seen one of those before. I'm sure you can find it somewhere because I've done it multiple times. My cash flow strategy just makes bank on consolidation days. So they're really boring. It's not a great day to do anything new. They suck for momentum traders for sure. They suck for trend traders for sure. But I like to think that, I have a solution for that with how I trade for cash flow. So I can make money when the market's going sideways and ranging. So I don't mind consolidation days, but I can also trade with momentum, with trends, and take advantage of those days as well. From Cyril, in your opinion, is the buying exhausted? I have felt that the buying is exhausted. I really have. But all that has led to is rotation. So, like, I think that the market has gotten a little bit exhausting when you look at NVIDIA, when you look at AMD, when you look at Palantir. That's not to say that they can't go higher. NVIDIA has been consolidating for the entire month of June and end of July. So, maybe what I think is tired is actually just rebuilding power for the next move higher as the 21 EMA catches up. But I have personally felt that the market has been tired for really the entire month of August, and the leaders have been tired for really most of August, but that hasn't turned into any sort of appreciable pullback for the market because what ends up happening is rotation. You get the IWM breaking higher, you're getting UNH having upside moves, or even you're getting Apple, which is the most under-owned of the Mag 7 stocks, having a really big upside move here in August as you see some degree of tiredness come into what had been the leaders up until this point. So I would like to say yes, that the market feels a little bit tired, but we haven't been able to get any sort of appreciable pullback. We haven't lost a single support level, and that should be respected. It should be respected that we haven't lost a support level. And the name of this game has been dispersion and rotation, and that's why trading the indexes has been so much worse than trading individual stocks. From AR, have you noticed anything notable about Jackson Hole week index price action in the past that could be relevant to this week? Nothing consistent enough that could be relative to this week. Most of the time, the Jackson Hole day is a dud, to be honest. Most of the time, it doesn't lead to anything. Most of the time, uh, what Powell says is a repeat of whatever he had just said in the last Fed meeting, and nothing exciting happens. The big exception to that was August 2022, and it was a very, very big exception. Powell got on and destroyed the market that day. This one for this Friday, I think that there is potential here. It could easily be a dud, where he just, he's so good at saying a lot of words that don't mean anything. It could easily be a dud, but why I think that there is potential is because the market's pricing in like an 85% probability of a Fed cut in September. And if Powell is just a little blunt and says, "Hey, did you guys see that PPI we just had? And that and inflation is upticking slowly, and we think it's only going to get worse based on the PPI we just saw. I'm not cutting rates in September. What are you, crazy?" If he says something like that, I mean, he won't say it exactly like I said it because he'll say it with a lot more words. But if he says something that leads the market to believe that there's no chance of a September cut, you could get a real move. So I think that the risk is to the downside. There is risk in both directions, but I think that the risk is to the downside for Friday. But because the risk is to the downside, I thought the risk was to the downside in CPI also, and we went up, which I'm not surprised that we went up because the number was in line. But what I was saying going into CPI last week was that I think like if you give me the same percentage miss as you do percentage beat, the hotter inflation number will hit the market down way more than the same degree of less inflation will bring the market up at this point. So I think that the risk is to the downside. Doesn't mean we have to go down though. From Daddy Trades, appreciate the feedback. Microsoft calls are playing with profits from the puts that I low key absolutely degend on. Weeklies the day after earnings. Okay. I love the idea of risking money you've already made to make more. I started a long-term QQQ January 570 put position. Okay. I don't hate it if as long as you're not, as long as the plan is to manage it. November, December, sometimes to some degree October tend to be much more bullish. I kind of think that our potential window of weakness, if you want to call that, for this market is really now through the end of September, maybe, depending on how events evolve through October. But it's going to be really hard, I think, to be bearish this year as we get into November, December, though we obviously need to see, all the moving parts and how they've adjusted by that point. But you could get a really big down move. I still think you get a really big down move between now and the end of September. And if you manage those puts really well, then you can make some good money off that. From Robert, I remember 2023 and 2024, the day before Jackson, the market sold off a bit as people always remember 2022. Okay, that's great information. We'll see if it follows suit this time around. It's kind of what Pat was saying on the radio into the close. He was saying like I would expect like the VVIX to uptick a little bit as we approach the Jackson Hole event, as people are just getting a bit nervous and trying to insure themselves. But we'll see if that translates into anything for the actual price action there in the market. All right. Looks like I got through. Cool. Looks like I got through everything on the VTF and the YouTube. Like I said, I think we can do a quick one today. One of the tightest trading sessions of the year so far. There's no major index level updates to discuss at all. I had a few good day trades. I hope you did too. And that's it. Have a good night.